It is a joy to be with you here today. So the idea here is for me to give a presentation, and then I love feedback. In the United Methodist tradition, there's not a lot of feedback other than people falling asleep at the 8:30 service. So since we've just had a good and healthy lunch, let's do a little bit of a presentation, and then I want to hear some feedback, some cue and commentary. I'm not sure that I have any answers, but at least I can add to the commentary. So what we thought we'd do today in my conversation with Janice, knowing that this group is so connected with not only where their businesses are going, but to understand some of the inherited systems that we have, the inherited structures that we have, that sometimes we take for granted. Some of the ways that we understand who we are can help shape our family business, our understanding of how we're affecting customers and our employees. So, in many ways, it didn't start with you. Your business did not start with you. You are carrying your ancestors with you in your business, whether you know it or not. And so there's an excellent book, by the way, of the same title by Dr. Mark Wallen, who talks about this at the cellular level and at the universal level. It's a marvelous book if you're interested. Father Richard Rohr, fellow Burkano, says in his book, Everything Belongs, even the new physics tells us that matter is merely the manifestation of spirit, but spirit, consciousness, relationship itself is the real thing. We used to think all the energy was in the particles of the atom. Now it seems that the energy is in fact in the space between the particles. How I describe systems theory or family systems theory is we have to learn not necessarily to be in relationship with those around us, but we have to be in relationship to the relationships. When I'm cut off from someone, yes, it has to do with how I've reacted or responded to that one. It is also about how I have experienced cut off in my life up to that point. So what does cut off mean in this new space? What does distance in a relationship look like? What does closeness look like? What does fusion or codependency look like? And the more I understand how I have lived into those relationships, the more, as Janice said, we can become self-aware and understand that we have agency and power to change. We are not relegated to our emotional regulation that we are experiencing right now. We can change, and we have the power to change. So I love to say when I walk into an organization that I'm less interested about who the people are, and I'm more interested in what is happening in those persons' relationship to the organization. How are they functioning when conflict arrives? In what way are they shaping the culture of this community? How are they continually growing and improving themselves inside the office and outside the office? Do they have good boundaries about what it looks like to have a healthy work-life balance? Do I have that in myself? Is that something I need to work on? I did most of my ministry in the Dallas area. My last church appointment was I left in 2022. I was the senior minister of First United Methodist Church in Dallas. What became very clear was during COVID and during the season that we were in for those months, it became clear that the progress that we had made as an organization in curating a culture, it became clear that I was no longer the leader they needed. I could take them here, but I couldn't take them there. Now, it took a lot of therapy and a lot of homework and a lot of soul work to make sure that I knew what that meant. some of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my career is to self-select out because it was no longer serving me, it was no longer serving the organization, and no longer serving the mission, purpose, value that I had for that organization. So I come to you today a little bit to say, I'm not really an expert, I'm co-learning with you. I don't have all the answers, but I may have some good questions for us to ask when we leave this place and re-enter our workspaces, re-enter our homes, re-enter those communities that we find ourselves together. So I'm talking about the universe of things. In this vast universe, we are bringing all kinds of things into this room today. All kinds of opportunities that we have in our life that we share together. And what I'm seeing and sensing is that when we bring in all of our context, our lived experiences, our education, we bring that to bear on the decisions that we make in our organizations. When we bring those to bear in our organizations, we have to attune ourselves to the context, not just the people. We have to relate to the relationships to which we belong. So that, in essence, is what I hope this small introduction gives us today as a framework for our conversation. I'm going to share a lot about my personal life with you, not because I need Gestalt therapy or group therapy today. I've got a great team for that. But because I think it's important for you to see and sense how I am navigating what I have inherited in the current leadership crucible that I have in the organizations I serve. All right, how we doing? Checking in with you. Good? Lunch was good? All right. Let's talk about systems thinking. This is a very broad overview. Systems thinking was introduced in the 1920s by an engineer named Ludwig von Bernloffi. The best name ever. You can't go wrong with a von in there and several F's. Ludwig von Bernloffi was one who was imagining how, let's call it an assembly line would work. This person works on this part of the assembly line to then bring those parts together to move that down the assembly line so at the end of the road you are launching the next vehicle. So in that sense, the parts are affecting the whole. In the 1950s, late 1950s, early 1960s, a sociologist and a psychologist named Murray Bowen brought this to the psychological realm. Murray Bowen was one who was imagining how we are all affected by systems and structures around us. And so some of his seminal work was looking how parts were affecting the whole, how the whole during the day. If I'm not having a really good day because I'm carrying a difficult conversation I had with my stepdad this morning, then I might not be fully present with the employee that I need to be fully present with. So it all weighs in, and it's all about homeostasis or balance. So let's talk through a few of these things at a high level, and I hope to get through them in our presentation today. These are the main focus areas that I work with individuals as a coach and in organizational processes. 3 or 6 major nodal points. The first is triangles. We live in a world where we have interlocking triangles. I am here at the microphone. Linda Parker is there. And Janice is here, the one who invited me. That's a triangle. My triangle is the speaker, my remote, and my computer. Another triangle is my water glass, my vocal cords, and my ability to keep everyone's attention while I bend over and take a drink of water. We're in these interlocking triangles all together. We have them in our businesses. My relationship to my spouse affects my relationship to one of my children. And triangles can ebb and flow. A triangle is always 180 degrees. Sometimes those parts between triangles are perfect 60 degrees, and we call it, everybody remember your sophomore
Right
geometry?
angle.
What's it called?
Right angle.
Equilateral triangles, that's right. And
Right
it
angle.
always has to add up to 180 degrees. So sometimes they can be obtuse, so we're very distant from people and parts, and then that one is maybe intersecting or interacting in that relationship, or they can be acute, where two members of your team or two members of the community are really close together and a third is really far away. I'll get into that in a few minutes. This is really the core of what I work with most people, is how does conflict happen? Oftentimes in triangles. I'll move on. Homeostasis. Homeostasis is a fancy systems word for balance. How do we maintain balance in our organizations, in our community? Many of our organizations have an inherited balance. Think of baby Andy in his crib. Boy, was he cute. He didn't have hair until he was 15 months old, but boy, he was cute. Baby Andy got a new crib. Oh, and baby Andy started to pull up on that crib. Anybody have children here? Anyone? No, just two people have kids. Okay, this metaphor is not going to go very far. Was anyone ever a child in here? Just a show of hands. Just one person. Okay, great. So, baby Andy's on the crib, and you all remember that mobile over your crib? There's a lion, there's a bear, there's an elephant, there's a tiger. Ooh, but baby Andy loved the lion. And so baby Andy would try to pull down the lion, and then when baby Andy could get his balance just a little bit, baby Andy would then try to put the lion in his mouth, and the lion was just filled with slobber and everything else. Well, baby Andy's mobile learned a new homeostasis. Because the lion got all the love, the bear, the elephant, the tiger did not. And what happens if baby Andy gives attention to the tiger or the lion or the bear? The whole system goes into flux, into chaos. When we draw our attention away from that we've been attending to, all of a sudden the system, the child's mobile, goes into chaos. Think about, let's be serious. Think about someone in your family who is living with an addiction, living with a secret, who has an extramarital affair. What happens when that person gets sober? What happens when that secret is revealed? What happens when that affair is let go of? The system tries to find a new balance. And the paradox of it all is it's not going back to the factory reset. As a matter of fact, the system's going to try to be in and continue that unhealthy dysfunction and get back to the attention of that affair, that addiction, that secret. It's going to try to get back, and the system's going to do all it can to meet that new functioning that we know is dysfunctional. I inherited generations of dysfunctionality in my family systems. I won't ask for a show of hands on that one. I am convinced that many of our families have significant dysfunction. And I am convinced that many of us, including me, still have a lot to do within us to care for, heal, and cure those dysfunctional systems. I have power, I have agency to do so. Not because I'm educated or well off, but because I have a language for it. Because what was once subjective, I can now see objectively. Third piece is boundaries. Every family has all kinds of boundaries. There are permeable boundaries, or when I was in my child development and family science classes, we call it laissez-faire parenting. You just come home anytime you want, Andy. There's no curfew. We trust you. We trust you. Just tell us where you're going to be. No problem. No worries. There are also authoritarian parents. Now, Andy, your curfew is 9:30. If you're any later than 9:20, we're just going to count you late. You need to be home. Then there's democratic parenting, where boundaries are negotiated by the whole. There's one who's in charge. In my family system, which you'll see in just a few minutes, it was my mom, who grew up in an army household, and she carried on the parenting of my army grandfather. Then there are all kinds of other ways of parenting in between. We've all experienced varying sets. Okay, still a tough room today. A global pandemic where we didn't really realize what we lost until we lost it. There was enough ambiguity and uncertainty there that made us, at once we were on our tiptoes, and then we were on our heels, dear friends. We had to regroup, reshuffle, reset who we were and how we were going to affect our well-being and our customers' well-being. That produces a level of chronic anxiety when we cannot fully articulate what the ambiguity was. We instead of finding an answer around what the ambiguity was, we draw on a frequent friend named fear. Chronic anxiety sets in when we as leaders lead with fear. I don't know about you all, but coming out of that season, trying to figure out what needed to be new or cared for in whatever functioning we were moving on, boy, there were a lot of hands going up and ways of saying, oh, we shouldn't do that. What if there's another flare-up? What if there's another outbreak? What if there's another shutdown? In Texas, it was way different than New Mexico was. I get that. Dallas County was much in line with where the state of New Mexico was. So, and we've all lived in it, and we have our opinions about it. To see now, some years after, or some years during, depending on your perspective, what can we bring? What did we learn from that experience that can help us shape our organization? Never miss a crisis. Define ambiguity quickly so that we can grieve together and then create new. We are all part of a system in our lives. Think of this as an iceberg. We live our lives event to event to event. And when we live our lives event to event to event, we oftentimes move through it mindlessly. Do the next thing. I have this task list, and if I can get this done today, I'll have this to do tomorrow, so on and so forth. We very rarely take the time, or one of my mentors calls it balcony time, moving to the balcony to consider why I'm doing what I'm doing. Instead of just moving through life mindlessly, why do I do this? Taking an hour a week, taking an hour a month to determine what that is. Let's pick on me, for example. Here in this room, an event of having a speaker during a lunch is something very common. As a matter of fact, you have a whole series of them, and it's just the next event. Janice invited you to all of the events that are upcoming. I need you to put this on your calendar. I need you to come to the next event. Well, what's beneath the event? The trend is we believe that getting people together with a common way of thinking and a common backgrounds, that there is something we have to offer when we invite someone from the outside to come in and give a new perspective. We think that that's important. I don't know, let's call it school. Back in the day, we used to transport teachers like the United Methodist Church transported preachers. They'd move around all kinds of places. You'd have a teacher from Iowa serving in Keller, Texas. You'd have teachers moved everywhere around, and the teacher who was able to come in and be an outsider and shape this understanding of the community in a new way from that outside perspective could help. That's part of the trend here. Bring someone outside to address this group of insiders. Well, what's underneath that? The systems and structures that we have determined that we appreciate knowledge gaining and self-esteem gaining, self-confidence gaining. We appreciate what's going on. We believe that the more we learn in our communities affects our leadership. The more we engage with those who are from the outside, help us to really understand what's going on. And this is a greater mental model that ports to maybe, just maybe, our understanding whenever it was when we moved from Neanderthal to human being, whenever that transition was, that we thought it'd be a good idea to educate children around us. Those who are still learning, and we set aside some time to teach that child. Our Hebrew scriptures indicate this beautifully. I had a Hebrew professor that said, all right, everybody, think that the book of Genesis started with the tug on mama's toga and asked a question like, why do we have a belly button? Well, you see, there were two human beings in this beautiful garden, and they were wandering around, and once they interacted with this divine being. Let's just call this divine being God. And this divine being God said, you can eat of anything in this beautiful garden, but don't eat from this tree of knowledge. Well, boy, that's a temptation, if there ever was one. Go on, Mom, go on, Mom. Well, one day, the couple decided, I'm kind of tired of figs and stuff. Let's go eat from the tree of knowledge. That sounds delicious. So they plucked the tree, and they discovered that they were both naked. And God went looking for them. Everywhere, God was searching for them. And they were hiding behind a fig bush with fig leaves in appropriate places now in Victorian world. Thank you. And we understood from that time to now that we would be born of woman. And we have a belly button because we are connected to our mothers, as Eve was connected to the land, to the garden, and to God. Now go run and play. Just a story. It's a story that started with a curious question, a belly button. We inherit these mental models, and we've coded them or codified them in such ways that they become our shared stories. We are affected by mental models quite a bit. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we do day in and day out is unchecked by the mental models that we've inherited. I don't know about you all, but I stay in the events portion of this iceberg. And maybe there's a water line right in the middle of the trends portion. I very rarely double check myself on the trends. I almost never check in on systems and structures. And goodness, mental models takes a lot of courage. In the church world, there's a phrase, you might hear it too in your organizations, Well, Andy, we've never done it that way before. Anyone ever heard that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was just me. We've never done it that way before. What are they asking? They're asking, where did we get this? Where did you get this? Why are you trying to affect this change when we've been so unchecked for so long? Okay, I'm going to stop there before I get preachy. Oh, I already got preachy? Got it. Okay, I'll move on. All right. Okay, let's talk about triangles. The best way I can talk about triangles is using what we call in family science a genogram. A genogram is a family map. Murray Bowen says that we are affected by our biological father, biological mother, and us. That is what I call our primitive triangle. Our relationship to our biological father, biological mother affects all of the relationships we will have and continue to have if it goes unchecked our whole lives long. It is if y'all are familiar with Ancestry.com, etc., you'll see a lot of these diagrams where males are squares, females are circles, and then there's this navigation of what you've inherited from generation to generation. So let's talk, just for fun, let's talk about my primitive triangle, shall we? Great. My primitive triangle, my dad was William Craig Stoker. My mom was Barbara Louise Hallis Stoker. She eventually remarried. I'll tell you the story in just a few minutes. Eventually remarried, and her third last name was Luckett. And there I am, Andrew Craig Stoker. Biological dad, biological mom, and me. This is us in 1979, 2 months before my dad was killed in a car accident. Right outside of Katy, Texas. The family story goes like this. Your father was so dedicated to his work that he was driving home late at night, fell asleep behind a steering wheel, and ran into the back of a brick truck. I remember getting the call. I remember the olive phone. You remember the corded phones, friends? My mom getting the call, my mom screaming. I remember that call as a 4-year-old. We moved to El Paso, Texas, later that year, early December of that year, and we lived 2 blocks away from my grandparents, Lloyd and Shirley. So throughout my life, I was told I look like my dad, I sound like my dad, I act like my dad. So there I am on the right, my dad is on the left. And then, in any time of transition, my grandparents thought, either out of great generosity or conflict avoidance, they decided to take us on cruises. So we went on 2 cruises. Right after my dad's death, there we are, a cruise around Puerto Rico. If you've not been there, it's gorgeous. Blackbeard's Castle is a must-see for those of you who are interested in Puerto Rico. Amazing place. My brother and I both had chicken pox, and we were hiding it from the staff. Another story for another day, but don't we look cute? Especially Trent. So there's my mom, there's me, my grandmother Shirley, my grandfather Lloyd, and my brother, 2 years younger than I, Trent. Then, right after my mom remarried, we went on a cruise to Hawaii with my stepdad, 15 years older than my mom, Ken. So Lloyd on the far right, Ken in the middle right, my mom, my grandmother, me kind of in the middle, and my brother with the captain's hat on, leading us along the way. Here's my mom and me singing at my home church on my senior Sunday. My uncle was an NFL ref. For a lot of years, he got tickets to the Super Bowl 30. That was a long time ago, long before the L came in. I think it was X's at that point. I'm not very good at Roman numerals. I'll get some tutorial there. And so this is us. I was 20. My brother was 18, and there we are. By the way, Diana Ross came in on a helicopter at halftime. It was awesome. I think the Cowboys were playing. Diana Ross was awesome. Here's my mom and me. right before they moved from New Braunfels. And so my mom lived with multiple sclerosis for a little over 30 years. And it's a terrible disease for those of you who are living with it, for those of you who have family members. I'm glad to talk about that. It's an awful disease and something that really affected our family greatly. This is my mom 2 months before her death. My mom died October of last year. And that's my mom and me visiting her. And so I go back to Dallas quite a bit. That's where I did a lot of my ministry. And so, of course, I had to spend 2 evenings with my parents, mostly to connect in that way. Here I am. Don't I look dashing? Thank you. Thank you very much. Your tip is coming. Don't I look dashing? So throughout my entire life, I've been told, you look like your dad, you sound like your dad, you act like your dad. You look like your dad, you sound like your dad, you act like your dad. Even to a week before my mom's death, my mom would say to me, after every phone call, when she came for a visit or I went for a visit, she'd always tell me how much my dad, my biological father, was proud of me. That was just a standard conversation. It became my mental model. It became the way I saw the world, that I was somehow living out Craig's legacy without really knowing him. How much does a 4-year-old really know about his dad, their dad, her dad? I remember I wasn't able to go to my dad's funeral. You don't have to be an armchair Freudian for this one. This is an easy one. And a gentleman came up to me and put his hands on my face and said, "You're now the man of the house." Oh, okay, so what did I become? I became the parentified child. I wonder why I'm in church work. This mental model that has stuck with me my entire life has helped to shape what my leadership crucible is. If I'm not careful, my boundaries get a little funky. If I'm not careful, I become undifferentiated and I lose my bearings. Being invited today actually helps me to be differentiated. Being invited here today says, I'm not Craig Stoker. I might look like him, sound like him, act like him, but I'm not him. The reason I bring this up, dear friends, is there are so many ways that we have gone unchecked in our relationships, and determining, maybe subconsciously or unconsciously, that we are living out someone else's life instead of living our own. That may be the hardest thing I say today. By understanding the system, the family of origin that we grew up in, it helps us to better understand how we are to engage with those around us, how to engage with the stories that we've been told, and the mythology around them. This is one of 4 pictures my brother and I have of my dad without a beer in his hand. The family story was falling asleep behind the wheel of a car early in the morning. Am I willing to step into truth-telling and care for the tragedy and trauma we've carried on? Am I willing to have the openness and honesty of my relationship to alcohol, of my dad's relationship to alcohol, and seeing it objectively, to then determine what I want to choose, how I want to live out my life, not someone else's? Triangles. Good on time? Good. So there are 7 laws of emotional triangles. I'm going to bring up 2. Number 1 and number 7. The 7 2 people is oftentimes held in balance by a third. Could be a person, could be a subject, could be an idea. I fell in love with Megan Callahan the first time I saw her. And as a stand-up comic, thank you so much. Thank you for knowing that. As a stand-up comic, putting myself through college, I did karaoke contests. I opened for Sarah Silverman. That's my big claim to fame. It was 1995. She's just as dirty in person as you see on TV. Great. So I needed to know kind of where I was standing. My trajectory to late night was a little stalled by the amount of money helping me buy food. So I got a nighttime custodial job at St. John's United Methodist Church in Lubbock, Texas. And there was the youth and university intern, Megan Callahan. Well, we became friends, and I knew that I wanted to ask her out. So every night, practicing my routine, I'd then practice the moment that we would have our first meal together, which was a lunch. And I wanted to tell her all the ways that I thought she was remarkable, all the ways that I thought she was wonderful, how she carried herself with poise and confidence, how she understood what was going on in a group. I wanted to tell her how much I think we need to be together forever and ever. And no one else needed to be around. All of that intensity and intimacy was locked on this poor young woman. So we finally get to lunch and my palms are sweating. I'm sure I had sweat on my brow, and we sat down to lunch and I said, I've been waiting a long time for this. I've rehearsed all of this. What's your favorite movie? I had to regulate the intimacy and intensity of that conversation on our first date with asking her about a movie. Everybody see that? Thank goodness I didn't tell her all the things I thought she was that first date. We would not be together, I'm certain of it. The level of intensity I have, especially as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, was too much. Too much. Megan would not have chosen, but I needed to balance out that, and we do it all the time. How's the weather? Or in our conversations with employees, we give them a compliment sandwich. Friend, these are the things you're doing well. This is the thing you need to change. And remember all the things you do well. We do it all the time. We have to bring up these other items to balance the intensity and intimacy of these conversations in order to regulate our behavior with the one that we're trying to be in community with. Fast forward a little bit with Dr. Friedman, there's the 7th law of emotional triangles, and it goes like this. You cannot affect the relationship to which you belong. You cannot affect the relationship to which you do not belong. So I've got biological mom, biological dad, and me. I cannot affect my relationship with my parents. I've got, let's pick on preachers out there. My best friend in ministry is Joe Clifford. He serves Myers Park Presbyterian Church in Myers Park, South Carolina, and his doctoral dissertation was on preaching and family systems. He says that the triangle in a church is preacher, God, and congregation. Now what we're told, I'm going to peel back the veil just a little bit, for those of you who are not ordained and may not know this, but in homiletics, I took 4 semesters of homiletics, that is the practice of preaching. We're told that our job is to make sure the congregation is in relationship with God. Until I started my PhD program, I thought that was gospel truth. The harder I worked at making sure God was in relationship with the congregation and the congregation with God, the more I failed. It's false. You cannot affect the relationship to which you belong. Therefore, the preacher has to have a good relationship with God, and have a good relationship with the congregation. And it's not ours to affect God loving the congregation more or the congregation loving God anymore. I say this to my congregation. I've said it to every congregation I've served. Now, 90% of what I say today is for me. So if you get anything out of it, great. Come talk to me after church. Because I'm still working on it. I'm still working on my relationship to God, and I'm still working on my relationship with you. I'm with you. We're in this together, friends. Likewise, as CEOs of companies, we have our triangle could be our brand and our employees. Our triangle could be our largest contributors to our organization and those who have yet to be in our organization. Triangles are everywhere. There's a triangle in this room. There's a triangle on Sunday mornings. There's a triangle. After this luncheon today, you're going to walk into a triangle. There's going to be some power play, or someone's going to come to you with some information about another employee or another interaction that they had, and you're going to be sucked in yet again, and a boundary will be crossed, and you're going to have to figure out what's mine to do. So how do we manage ourselves in these triangles, in these power moves? We have to work on neutrality. What's actually happening? Not what went wrong or what did you do, but what's happening? Be curious. If someone's having a bad day, they're having a bad day. Maybe that's it. If there's a larger issue involved, then ask curious questions. Staying neutral longer helps you to self-regulate